You're listening to New Churches Podcast, a production of Send Network on newchurches.com. We discuss all things church planting. If you're looking to take your next step toward multiplication, you're in the right place. Newchurches.com provides relevant and reliable resources for church planters, church multipliers, and disciple makers. Our growing library features pastors, planters, and church leaders like Ed Stetzer, David Platt, Trillia Newbell, Christine Hoover, Dahadi Lewis, Trevin Wax, and many others.
All right, we are back for another amazing episode of the New Churches Podcast. The title often gives away the theme. Well, I guess that's the point of a title. And the title of this episode is The Long View. And probably the title also might give you a hint that we're going to talk to somebody who's been around a little longer than me and someone who's been a little less around. And we'll talk about both. So the episode is The Long View, Church Planting with End Goals in Mind. I've got two guests. One's a returning guest. So Scotty Smith is the founding pastor of Christ Community Church in Franklin, Tennessee. That's a PCA church he planted with some friends in 1986. After pastoring CCC for 26 years, he resigned in May 2012 to serve the broader Christian community and church, preaching, teaching, and writing. And now he's teacher in residence at West End Community Church in Nashville, which is actually a daughter of Christ Community. Teaches adjunctively at places like Covenant, Westminster, Philadelphia, Redeemer, Dallas, and RTS Orlando. I think that's actually the last time we taught something together. We did something at RTS Orlando back in the day. Yep. Scotty's written a number of books, including Unveiled Hope, Objects of His Affection, and Everyday Prayers. And Scotty and his wife, Darlene, have two adult children. Okay, so, and obviously we're going to talk some. The long view is, Scotty, just, you just quickly volunteered your age beforehand. And so how old are you, Scotty?
So February 1st, which is Groundhog's Day Eve, I will be 73.
Okay, nice. Okay, so that's older than me. You're almost old enough to be my dad. So let's go with that. And then I'm probably old enough to be Adam's dad. I don't know. Adam, how old are you?
32.
32. Yeah. So there you go. I mean, we would be both starting young, but we could, this is like a that makes me feel old, Scotty, that I'm old enough to be his dad. Yeah. So Adam grew up in a Muslim family, converted to Christianity as a teenager. Since believing the gospel, he has a consistent vision for church planting, and he planted Redemption City Church in the city of Baltimore. And Adam and his wife Sherry have three sons. Adam, what did we talk about? We had you on a couple of episodes a while back. Do you remember what we talked about?
We talked about conflict amongst teams,
nice,
which was a bit of a dicey topic.
It was.
And we also talked about raising up leaders from within.
Okay, cool. So what we'll do is in the show notes, if you're just listening now, because, people join this podcast stream. We have over almost 800 episodes of most listened to podcast on church planting in the world today. But we'll link those so you can hear from Adam there as well. Okay, but let's get on to our topic. So, church planters tend, Scotty, not to be. I remember I think we were doing a global church advancement back in our friend Steve Day. Yep. And with all these church planters come in, and they're they're just they are so drunk with the vision. They're so, I'm just going to plant. They got the only thing maybe they're thinking about is the launch service. I mean, it's not even like, what do I do the week after? I'm struck by how many are like, I did this. I remember I started sending Rick Warren, no less, a message over CompuServe to say, Rick, I had our first service. What do we do now? And we just did a retirement video for him. And I cited that. I still had a screenshot I showed just for fun. That's how old I was. But, you get to the first service, but they don't always think with the end in mind. So go back, 1986, you and your friends planted Christ Community Church. Yeah. How did you build, or maybe you didn't, but how did you build at the beginning of your ministry of Christ Community Church things that became part of the fabric of the church as it matured?
Well, fortunately, I had a spiritual father named Jack Miller that became my spiritual dad when I was at Westminster Seminary. And Jack had been like 2 or 3 years into a major gospel renewal in his own heart, life, and story. And so what the advantage I had, Jack was the church planter. He was the one that said, you should go plant that church in Franklin and I'll walk with you. But what I had, Ed, fortunately, with a seasoned father who had a real missions heart and a real understanding of the gospel, I realized early on we're going to absolutely need to do the mechanics, but equally the organics, because every image in the Bible of growing a church, it's mechanics, but it's organic. It's harvest oriented. It's a seed. It's a bloom. It's a blossom. It's a bouquet. It's a garden ultimately. So I think for me, Ed, I had some good coaching early on that would say, Lord's building for eternity, not next week. So it was helpful to our DNA. And that continues to serve me well. And I have that longer view more than ever now.
Interesting. Okay, good. Now again, Adam, you're like just starting. I mean, so you're, and again, I recognize that I always find it fascinating, and this is going to sound bad as I'm about to ask you a question. I always find it fascinating when 28-year-olds write books on marriage. I'm kind of like, maybe I don't even want to read your book for until you've been married for a while. And there was kind of a rash of those in the Christian world. So I actually, we wouldn't have had you on the program if I wasn't a fan. So don't misunderstand. But you're in your first decade of ministry. Are there some things you're trying to build in right now that you're sort of hoping, you don't really know, but you're sort of hoping that will impact the long-term aspirations for what you want Redemption City to be? Or another way to put it, how are you starting with the end in mind?
Sure. I mean, we're almost 5 years in, so we're young, but, we're walking a little bit. We're talking a little bit. We can do some things. When we started the church, we knew we wanted not just to have a service on Sundays, but to be a part of a church planting movement, to see church plants come, like the church Antioch in Acts 13, to be a modern Antioch. And so from the very beginning, we always said that's our vision, to be a church planting movement. And I set up systems and values and programs and et cetera to build our church towards that. And then we just sent out 2 of our first church planters, one to Japan, which is the second most unreached people group in the world, and one to another part of Baltimore with 30 people. And some ways that we did that is, I just said, I made our vision statement that I started a leadership development program the first day of the church, where I poured into leaders, and 2 of those guys in that program are now church planters. We give 5% of every dollar we receive to church planting. From the very beginning, we just had that in mind and worked towards that, and we started to see the beginnings of it. And hope in 100 years, there's 50 more churches from RCC. It's
awesome. Now you know why we want Adam on. I mean, and I would say, Adam, this level of intentionality is not as common in church planters as, that's why we have you on, because I'm guessing for a lot of people, it would be, I'm just trying to plant my first church. But you're past that first service. So, Scotty, I want you to reflect back, because we've been observing, and like I said, you and I were teaching church planting together. I had to be 20 years ago. Yep. And we've been observing church planters for a long time. If you could speak as an older, wiser brother who's gone through some of the stuff, who's seen a lot of church planters come and go, what advice would you give them to think more intentionally about, having the end in mind, and what, contrast that with maybe what we've seen? I wish there was more of this and less of that, if you don't mind. Yeah, no, I would say, and I don't want to speak so broadly, it just sounds real abstract, but it's actually real specific for me in terms of, what we did and what I do now with planters that I coach. I say, look, you got to live in the whole story of God. Really remember the echoes of Eden that are in your bones, because if that church you're planting doesn't smell a little bit like the ache for Eden, something's wrong. Let me cut to the chase here. The entire story of creation, fall, redemption, restoration, we inhabit all 4 aspects of the story that runs all the way into the new heaven and new earth. And so, to me, Ed, what that has represented is the planter has to have as a high priority living in awe of the story, seeing themselves, first of all, as called to be a character in the story of God before they're a carrier. A lot of the church planters I've worked with think pragmatically about getting a job done. Yeah. And they lose what Scripture say is central, which is a love for Jesus. And I'm thankful that, again, I got coached by a man who, at the end of his life as a church planter, planted churches locally and internationally, loved Jesus more than he did at the beginning. So stewardship of heart, really beginning to smell the grass of the new heaven and new earth, so that you really know what you're doing today is already connected to that. Now, we can talk practically what that looks like, but
I mean, as an Enneagram 5, I'm living in the whole story, but that no matter your personality type, living in the whole story of God. I mean, I preached, as you know, we've been in the city 43 years. I preached a church into Camelot and then into Carlot. You stay in any expression of the body of Christ long enough, you will experience rapture and rupture. You will be disappointed and disappointing. You got to have that long view.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's interesting because, I have been, for the last, at the time of this recording, for the last few months, I've been living in the UK, living in Oxford and teaching there. And, and I didn't go away starstruck, but it was interesting that, every day I lived on this one lane road at this manor that was built in 1611. But that wasn't what was fascinating. I walked by this church, St. Bartholomew's, and I take the bus. I didn't have a car. So I'd walk by St. Bartholomew's, and here's a church that has been worshiping in this space for over 1,000 years. And, when I was at Moody Church, Moody Church would talk about being I was the interim there for 4 years. It was the oldest extant megachurch in the world. And it was like, oh, look, we're from the 1860s. And they're like, they call that a new church in England. So, it's like crazy. So we want to talk about that kind of longevity. And I really liked, Adam, you talked about, 100 years from now. I got to tell you, I don't hear a lot of church planners talk about 100 years from now. So the fact that you even said that was, I think, super helpful. So, but you are taking actions now that impact what is going to be the kind of ministry that's there. So I want both of you, first you, Adam, to talk some about personalizing this, taking, the long views are our theme. Scotty's already mentioned taking the long view. But let's be honest, I was looking over a list of church planners that I had been working with from about 20 years ago, and about half of them are out of the ministry now. Mm-hmm. So what personally do you do to seek to, in your own spiritual life and family, I'm going to start with Adam and then go to Scotty, so that you take the long view as a young pastor, Adam, and then I want you to just give advice and just jump right in, Scotty, about what that might look like and what you might encourage. Start with you, Adam.
Yeah, well, slow down. Relax, Sabbath. Don't focus so much on the urgent, focus more on the non-urgent important things. You can spend so much of your early church planting days working on your ministry, or working in your ministry rather than working on your ministry. You should be spending just as much time working on the church as you are working in the church. What I mean by that is, it's very easy to focus on the urgent things like, I got to preach my sermon this Sunday, I got to lead a staff meeting, I got to deal with this conflict within our membership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you take the long view, I want to do this for the next 50, 100 years, you begin to say, okay, that meeting can wait 2 weeks. Hey, maybe this sermon is a little shorter, and we can focus on maybe splitting the sermon in half, doing two 20-minute sermons, and it doesn't have to blow people's minds this Sunday. And I'm going to focus more on developing a leader. I'm going to focus more on developing myself, reading this book, going to this cohort. You just chill out a little bit. And especially in that first year, I was not taking days off. And it was because I did not have that long view. I was thinking my marathon was a sprint. And when you sprint in marathons, you die. So I've just chilled out a little bit, man.
Yeah, when you sprint in marathons, you die. That may be Clint runs our podcast stuff here. That's like a bumper phrase to what we're talking about here. Because I think everyone, again, I planted my first church at 21, Don and I did, in Buffalo, and we sprinted, and then we sprinted again the next church and sprinted again the next church. So we had a series of sprints that eventually we learned that's not sustainable, but I had to learn the hard way. I was pretty young. So Scotty, sprints not marathons not sprints. Give us some more about how
absolutely.
Yeah.
That was so helpful, Adam. We've got to learn to live and to lead at the pace of grace. And for us also, what that looked like early on, we said, all right, what are the main environments that God clearly says a healthy church is going to attend to? And for us, we just started thinking and speaking and building and modeling and nurturing in terms of triads. Upreach, inreach, outreach. That's not new and novel, but it's intentional. We focused on heart engagement, the church as a worshiping community, and that was less about kazoos, banjos, and pipe organs. It was more about how do we center ourselves on the worship and glory of God. Upreach, inreach. if we're not building gospel community, we may raise up a lot of worker bees, but they'll end up fighting each other and competing with each other. So really gospel culture flowing out of, a doxological orientation, which meant for us, our elders would spend one Monday evening a month just praying, not figuring stuff out. We wanted the elders to be enamored in wonder of Jesus, etc. Third, outreach. Of course, you're not either worshiping God or building significant gospel community if there's not clear intentionality to be a local church, to be involved locally, like you've said, Adam, about a church planting movement. And you know what that also means? Really loving and serving the other church planters in your area that are so different from you, and don't see them as competition, but really learn to be supporters of each other. So that was one thing. Last thing I'd quickly say, in terms of just the person of Jesus, the three primary offices of Christ, Ed and I, you'll remember the important voice of John Frame in a lot of this conversation, but all three offices of Christ, prophet, priest, and king. Some churches want to be the teaching church or just the healing church or just the missions church. Jesus is not Neapolitan Christology, pick your chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. We developed even our worship culture that would say, how are we honoring all three offices of Christ? Enjoying them, surrendering, but also an outward facing to the culture. So that's framework, and it really served us well.
And we are on a podcast with a preacher right here. The pace of grace, the Neapolitan. Come on.
Amazing.
Come on.
Adam, that's what happens when you're old. You just end up, start talking like, babbling brooks or something. But
no, it's great.
So
We can listen to
good.
you all day, Scotty. We can listen to you all day. All right. So here's the thing, though. And I don't know, Scotty, you may not be the typical church planter personality for, just from what I know about you, but the typical church planter personality, there's my friend Minnie Caliguire. She talks about there are jet fuel drinkers and there are candle burners, and in the Christian life. And I'm a jet fuel drinker and I'm married to a candle burner, so I know some of what she speaks. But on the church planting side, overwhelmingly, these are not particularly contemplative individuals. So you read these books about, I should, even you throwing out the Enneagram. I don't know. If church planners are engaging the Enneagram, they're engaging the Enneagram to figure out how to get people to do stuff. And again, I'm an Enneagram 8, so, my life is filled with sin. So what would you say, though? Because again, I remember sitting in a room with you in Orlando, and just getting these church planners to slow down with Steve Childers and our friend to say, let's take 3 days, 4 days, or whatever it was. I think it was a week of training. Yeah. We did this as a joint RTS class with Global Church Advancement. Yeah. I think it's so these are not naturally inclined people, and yet that's what attracted them to church planting. We literally assessed them to find entrepreneurial self-starters, and then we're kind of shocked and offended that they're not particularly thoughtful, contemplative, and take the long view. So how do we turn racehorses into something else? Because I've seen the carnage of not taking the long view. Start with you, Scotty, and then go to you.
Absolutely, because I can speak to this because I had my firstborn ministry burnout at age 50 when our church was doing great. Part of I needed to realize, come to understand, and this was after my spiritual father had died, so Jack was not in my life at the time, but I had confused the enjoyment of ministry in a very unique setting in downtown Franklin with enjoying the Lord. So the Lord gave me the gift of a burnout, and I say that because a lot of the work I do now with Christian leaders in all kinds of contexts, church planning, church leaders, senior leaders, or Christian leaders that are working in some part of the culture is you don't have to have a burnout. There's nothing noble about that. And so the pacing, what happened after my burnout at age 50 was I finally began to get the counseling I needed. I realized that I had allowed myself to see the platform as the place to hide rather than really walking with deep friendship. So it was only after I was 50 that I really began to become, I think, a healthy man. And that has continued to involve relationships, the ordering of my day. Now, granted, now I am an empty nester and I'm not a senior pastor of a church, but this happened even before then. I do spend the better part of my day early in the morning meditating, praying, Here's what, let me throw this out here because this is kind of new to me, but it's become helpful. Leaders of any kind, if you think about Jesus as true, good, and beautiful, which is a triad that philosophers from many different backgrounds use about the truth, the goodness, and the beauty. All right, church planners I've known or pastors, what you tend to lose first is the beauty, then you lose the goodness, and then you're struggling just to be a defender of truth. We have to train leaders to see God as beautiful, that they might feast upon his goodness. And not just be defenders of the truth. And this last 3 years on our culture, it's just been a free for all in terms of who's more right than the next guy. So
it's great. Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Adam, in just a second, but I want to come back to Scotty here. And Scotty, I want to say this I want to be careful. So is that a little bit of an older man's luxury to say, now I become more, in my 50s, I went to counseling and all, et cetera, et cetera? Because church planning tends to be younger. And for me, I got to tell you, I'm at a stage where I feel like I'm growing it's slowing down. I wasn't good at that in my 20s. Yep. And so should we say to people in their 20s that you need to do these things now, or should we let them run at the pace they're trying to run? What is our response? Because lots of church planners are listening to this in their 20s and saying, sure, in my 50s, I'll go to counseling and slow down too.
The whole point of that was this. I really wish I did not have to have wait through a burnout because, I'm walking with younger guys now, teaching in seminaries, walking with church planners, 3 church planners in the UK over where you are. I walk with a guy in City Church Manchester, one in downtown Edinburgh, and one in Northern Ireland. And this is what I'm hammering now. Your heart communion with the Lord, your love for realizing that you are to be the steward of an informed mind and an inflamed heart. And so there's things we can put in place early on for the leader, which really begins to say, and Jack Miller told me this, he said, Scotty, a mark of your growing in the gospel is who are you going to be willing to disappoint? And church planners, we can be approval sucks. Yep. But if we're not enjoying the Lord, the only thing I ever wrote down in the 1984 NIV Bible I still carry around is this. Jack said, what will all your labors avail if you're no longer enjoying the Lord? Well. And so we gotta go back to the basics, but maybe the basics not of the pragmatics, but really knowing God, worshiping the Lord. And this is his story. It's his covenant. He will bring to completion what he began. Let's participate in it. So no, 20-year-olds. I'm finding now that the good news for some church planners, you mean I don't have to work 80 hours a week? Yeah. If you do, that's called idolatry. So
come on. All right. No, I agree with you. I'm just trying to think what I would have thought as
of course.
Ed Stetzer. And so Adam, here you are. You're younger than both of us by decades. So, but again, we have you on here because we're seeing you and walking in some of these ways. What advice would you give to that young church planter who's right now saying, "Man, I'm just not sure I can do that. I gotta plant this church, and I got work to do"?
Well, I think first of all, the reason that person feels rushed and urgent is because the structure of church planning almost requires you to be. You have fiscally, you have money support that's running out. I've got to get us to self-sustainability by this time, 3 years in, 4 years in, or else. I got to get this momentum going and keep the momentum going. So I have all these urgent needs of people, and especially in cities, that need my help. I need someone who needs a house. I need somebody who needs food. I need somebody who needs counseling. So just everything in church planning screams urgency, screams meet all those needs. And you have got to just soak your heart in the truths of the gospel, that God is the one who builds this church, he says. Hebrews 1, that Jesus purified our sins and then he sat down. So the King of the universe is sitting right now, chilling. So we can too. That Jesus, who was the best church planner of all time, was never rushed. That he had Middle Eastern meals. I don't know if you've ever had a Middle Eastern meal, but that's a long meal, man. A lot of hummus for Middle Eastern meals. He was developing leaders. And so do you really believe that God is the God over the momentum of your church plant, over the finances of your church plant, over the success or health or even existence of it? And if you really believe that, you'll pray a lot more, you'll Sabbath a lot more, you'll chill a lot more, you'll play some more golf, you have a hobby, and you won't work 80 hours like Scotty says. Yeah.
We're going to end with that fascinating, helpful conversation. Church planner, let me encourage you, take that long view and to dwell in the beauty of the gospel and the power of the Holy Spirit. Thanks for listening to the New Churches podcast. Again, we'll talk to you on the next episode.
You've been listening to the New Churches podcast, brought to you by Send Network. If you like what you heard, take a few minutes to rate and review us or share this episode with a friend. It's the best way to show your support. To find more reliable resources to start your new church well, visit newchurches.com.